The silence in the 22nd floor conference room of Eleanor Vance's Seattle architectural firm was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic drumming of Serafina's perfectly manicured fingers on the polished obsidian table. Outside, the perpetual Washington drizzle wept against the high-rise windows, mirroring the tension trapped inside. Four lawyers flanked Serafina, their briefcases open, documents spread out like a complex, premeditated attack. Eleanor's eyes traced the sharp, unforgiving lines of the inheritance waiver, a document designed with clinical thoroughness to erase her from the history of her grandfather's life and legacy. "You need to sign over August's estate or prepare to face court, little bloodless sis." Serafina's voice, usually laced with shallow charm, was now sharp and cold. Eleanor, 35 and the respected proprietor of a firm focused on sustainable city planning, knew this moment was inevitable, but the raw hostility still felt like a physical assault. Her grandfather, August, had died 3 days prior. Serafina was not here to grieve. She was here to claim what she insisted was hers by divine, biological right. The presumed prize. A $5 million fortune encompassing the grand estate in Emerald Bay, the irreplaceable vintage automobile collection, and the domestic investment portfolio. As Eleanor reached calmly for her steaming teacup, studying the waiver, Serafina's lead attorney, a man whose silver hair betrayed decades of sharp litigation, leaned forward, delivering the veiled threat. If she signed, the fight was over. If she refused, the court would rule on biological precedents, severing Eleanor, the adopted daughter, from the family forever. But Eleanor knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her core, that this opening salvo was based on a fundamental, devastating miscalculation of August's true vision and true wealth. The silence stretched, the seconds ticking by, waiting for the one word that would either grant Serafina her victory or shatter her entire reality. "My name is Eleanor Vance. For a decade, I have focused my passion on building things that matter, designing structures in Seattle that are as enduring as they are environmentally responsible. But in that moment, success meant nothing. All that mattered was the legacy of the man who chose me, August." Serafina had flown in from California with her entourage specifically for this confrontation. She wore her entitlement like an expensive cloak. "You always knew this day would come," she pressed, her blue eyes as sterile as the glass tabletop. "August might have pretended to love his little adopted granddaughter, but biology is paramount. The courts will see reason when they understand you're not really family." The silver-haired lawyer chimed in, projecting an air of reasonable authority. "Miss Vance, this is a generous offer. Your sister could indeed contest the will based purely on biological precedents, but she prefers to avoid litigation if you will simply acknowledge the natural order of inheritance." I rose to prepare the tea service, a ritual August had instilled in me. The familiar movements of handling the porcelain and the antique kettle were soothing. Serafina had always seen my adoption as a flaw, a sign of being unwanted. She never grasped that August had seen something in the frightened 8-year-old I once was, something worth fighting for, even against the loud objections of Serafina's own mother. "Would anyone care for tea?" I asked, my voice calm, the pleasantry visibly irritating Serafina. "I have an excellent Earl Grey blend that August brought back from his last visit to the British Isles." "This is not a social visit, Eleanor. Sign the papers." Serafina snapped, her face flushing. I poured the hot water, watching the amber liquid diffuse into the delicate china cups. August had spent countless afternoons sharing stories in his study while teaching me this precise ritual. Those conversations about history, business ethics, and travel had been my true inheritance, knowledge that Serafina couldn't value, let alone imagine. I returned to the table, smiling warmly, first at Serafina, then at her lawyers, noting the subtle shift of their discomfort under her expectant glare. "Of course," I said, setting down the tray. "I understand completely. You want to finalize everything quickly. Settle the estate without complications." I met Serafina's gaze. "I will make sure everything is properly handled tomorrow morning." Serafina's posture eased immediately, mistaking my composure for surrender. She had no inkling that tomorrow morning would bring a brutal illumination that would utterly dismantle her assumptions about August's true worth and his final, masterful lesson. The years leading up to this moment were a stark illustration of the difference between Serafina and me. While she focused on her social calendar, spending August's readily available funds on luxury vacations and couture clothing, I was quietly cultivating a relationship with him that transcended typical family obligations. It started in college when I was studying architecture at the University of Washington. During one of our weekly coffee sessions, August mentioned he was looking into property investments in Europe. When I showed genuine intellectual curiosity, not just about the money but about the urban planning and market analysis, his interest was piqued. "Most people see buildings as just structures," he'd said, stirring his coffee. "But you understand they are part of a larger tapestry, connected to economics, culture, and human needs." That single conversation blossomed into countless others. Soon I wasn't just researching for him. I was analyzing international property values in major markets. Edinburgh, the historic financial center, Venice with its complicated regulatory environment, and Hong Kong, the gateway to Asia. Serafina, meanwhile, saw these discussions as tedious background noise. During family dinners, she would dismiss them, busy on her phone or detailing her latest relationship mishap. "Eleanor's always been such a little bookworm," she would scoff. "I don't understand why you bother with all those boring business talks, Grandpa." August would catch my eye across the table. I saw disappointment flicker there, a slow, painful recognition that Serafina fundamentally misunderstood the concept of value. The decisive shift occurred 2 years ago, at Serafina's extravagant birthday party. She had insisted August finance the entire affair at the most exclusive venue in downtown Seattle. When the final bill arrived, she didn't even glance at the total before sliding it toward him. "Thanks, August," she'd chirped breezily. "You're simply the best." Later that evening, driving him home, August was unusually subdued. "She's never once asked about my health," he murmured finally. "Never wondered if I was managing my finances, or if I needed help with anything. She just assumes the money will perpetually be there." That night in his study, our conversation deepened. He showed me documents I had never seen, trust agreements and deeds that painted a picture of wealth far exceeding the domestic holdings we all knew about. "The assets Serafina knows about were just the prologue," August confessed, his voice heavy with reflection. "I've been contemplating legacy, and who truly grasps the weight and responsibility that comes with great wealth." Over the following months, he shared the entire scope of his international portfolio, explaining how he had quietly constructed a global real estate empire worth over $20 million. This included key properties in Edinburgh's historic financial district, luxury residential developments in Venice, and commercial buildings in Hong Kong's thriving business center. "Serafina views money as something to liquidate and consume," he observed one afternoon. "But you, Eleanor, you recognize that wealth is a tool for creation, a means to build something enduring." The transformation in our bond was gradual but profound. He was preparing me to inherit not just his money, but his ethical framework for how that money should be utilized. 6 months before his death, August called me to his study for what he termed an essential conversation. The room was dominated by legal files, and his primary attorney, Alastair Finch, was connected via video conference from his office overlooking the Thames. "Eleanor," August began, his voice steady despite his failing health, "I need you to understand something about your sister that I have resisted acknowledging for too long." He presented a folder containing printed emails and text messages, Serafina's communications over the past year. Every message centered on demands, requests for advance inheritance for shopping sprees, requirements for vacation funding, complaints about her credit card limits. Not a single message contained gratitude or inquiry into his well-being beyond the financial. "Look at this message from last week," August said, displaying Serafina's latest communiqué. A terse, demanding request for money to purchase a new luxury vehicle, written with the cold entitlement of someone ordering fast food. "She doesn't even sign it with a standard endearment." He then showed me my own messages from the same period. Notes asking about his latest doctor's appointments, offers to assist with grocery shopping, and sincere thank you notes for professional advice. The contrast was undeniable, striking, and heartbreaking. "I have made decisions," August stated, sliding a thick stack of documents across the desk. "The international properties, the offshore accounts, the real estate trusts I have spent the last 15 years building, they are all being transferred to you." I stared at the scale of the transfer in shock. Deeds for millions of dollars of property in Edinburgh, trust documents governing commercial developments in Venice, investment portfolios managed through Hong Kong banks. "August, I cannot accept this," I protested. "It's too much. Serafina is your biological granddaughter." His expression tightened. "Biology does not define character, Eleanor. You have offered me respect, genuine care, and demonstrated an understanding of responsibility. Serafina has shown me that she merely views me as a bank account with legs." Alastair Finch explained the complex legal architecture August had meticulously constructed. The visible, domestic assets, the wealth Serafina knew about, would pass to her through the conventional will. However, the international holdings, the true bulk of the wealth, had already been transferred to me through a sophisticated network of foreign corporations and offshore trusts. "This structure has been in development for 3 years, Finch explained. "Every transfer is meticulously documented and legally structured to resist any challenge. Serafina's lawyers will find nothing irregular about the domestic inheritance because it adheres to standard probate procedures." As I left August's estate that night, the documents safely secured, he squeezed my hand. "You are the granddaughter of my heart," he whispered. "Blood doesn't create family. Love and respect do." Now, sitting across from Serafina and her legal army, I understood that the revelation tomorrow morning was August's final, profound lesson on the chasm between entitlement and genuine inheritance. The following morning arrived, cold and drizzly, perfectly fitting the gravity of the impending event. I had spent the night confirming every detail of the documents August had entrusted to me. Serafina arrived at the downtown offices of Finch & Partners precisely at 9 a.m., radiating an aura of absolute confidence. She brought the same team of lawyers, plus 2 extra associates, clearly anticipating a rapid routine division of August's estate according to her long-held assumptions. "I truly appreciate you being so reasonable about this, Eleanor," Serafina chirped as we ascended the elevator to the 23rd floor. Her designer dress was brand new, an obvious acquisition made in celebration of her impending windfall. "I know August cared for you in his own way, but family law is extremely clear about biological precedents." Her silver-haired lead attorney nodded his solemn agreement. "Your sister is exhibiting great generosity, Miss Vance. Most biological heirs would pursue full litigation to guarantee that adoptees receive absolutely nothing." I managed a polite smile. They were unknowingly walking into Alastair Finch's domain, the central hub where August's global real estate empire was managed. Serafina had focused her legal efforts entirely on domestic probate law, never bothering to investigate the intricacies of international holdings or offshore trust governance. Alastair Finch, distinguished and impeccably precise, greeted us in his spacious office overlooking the Willamette River. His assistant served coffee in fine bone china cups as we gathered around the conference table. "Before we commence," Finch began, opening a substantial file, "I must ensure everyone has a complete understanding of the scope of August Vance's estate planning. There are domestic assets, which follow traditional probate procedures, and international holdings, which are governed by entirely separate legal structures." Serafina's lead counsel leaned forward with eagerness. "We are prepared for any minor complications. Our preliminary research indicates the estate is primarily comprised of the Emerald Bay residence, the vintage automobile collection, and the domestic investment portfolio, valued at approximately $5 million. Finch nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, those are the domestic assets. They will indeed be transferred to Serafina as the biological heir, minus standard taxes and administrative fees." He paused, examining the documents before him. However, that total represents roughly 20% of August's actual net wealth. The room went utterly silent. Serafina's triumphant expression disintegrated, replaced by confusion and a nascent sense of panic. What do you mean, 20%? August Vance constructed an extensive international real estate portfolio over the past 15 years, Finch continued, his tone professionally detached. These assets include commercial properties in Edinburgh's financial district, luxury residential developments in Venice, and key commercial buildings in Hong Kong's business center. The combined value significantly exceeds $20 million. Serafina's lawyer cleared his throat, scrambling for control. If these assets exist, they must still be subject to inheritance law. Biological precedents would apply. Finch permitted himself a slight, almost imperceptible smile. That would certainly be the case if the assets were still owned by August's estate. However, they were legally transferred to Eleanor Vance through a complex series of offshore trusts and international corporations precisely 3 years ago. He clarified that while August maintained managerial control during his lifetime, legal ownership automatically transferred to Eleanor upon the activation of the trust documents. I watched Serafina's face shatter. Her confidence crumbled, replaced by naked disbelief and escalating terror. That is impossible. He never mentioned any international properties to me. August meticulously documented his reasons for the transfer, Finch stated, pulling out a second folder. He specifically expressed concern regarding what he categorized as transactional family relationships and wished to guarantee his wealth would be stewarded responsibly, rather than merely consumed. Serafina's lead attorney began frantically scribbling notes. We demand to review all documentation. We need to investigate any evidence of undue influence or potential mental incapacity at the time of transfer. Finch calmly handed over a thick stack of records. This included detailed medical reports confirming August's mental acuity throughout the transfer process, certified psychological evaluations confirming his absolute competence, and most damningly video and audio recordings of August explaining his decisions. As Serafina's team buried themselves in paper, my mind drifted back to all those afternoons in August's study, learning about global markets, understanding the weight of responsible wealth management. He hadn't just been planning an inheritance. He had been testing and preparing me for the tremendous burden of this responsibility. The audio recordings presented by Finch were devastating. He played them with clinical, professional precision, each segment exposing a deeper layer of Serafina's sense of entitlement and her utter disregard for August's emotional or physical well-being. This segment is from Serafina's birthday dinner 2 years ago, Finch announced, pressing play on a digital recorder. Serafina's young, careless voice filled the tense room. Come on, August, it's just money. You can't take it with you, right? I deserve to enjoy life while I'm young. Serafina paled as she listened to her own recorded words. That was taken completely out of context. I was only jesting. The recording continued with August's gentle, weary response. I understand the desire to enjoy life, Serafina, but I wonder if you have ever considered where this money originates, or what happens when it is irresponsibly gone. Serafina's laugh on the recording was sharp, dismissive. That's your job to worry about, not mine. I'm not some boring accountant like Eleanor. Finch paused the playback. August maintained detailed records of all family interactions for the past 5 years. Would counsel require further confirmation? The next recording was even more damaging. Serafina angrily demanding money for a Mediterranean vacation, growing furious when August suggested she contribute even a small portion of the cost herself. I fail to understand why you are being so difficult, her recorded voice complained. You're rich. I'm your biological granddaughter. End of the story. With each new playback, Serafina's legal team grew quieter. Her actions, while not criminal, painted an undeniable portrait of someone who viewed her own grandfather exclusively as a perennial source of funding, undeserving of basic respect or care. These recordings spanned 3 years, Finch elaborated. They meticulously document a clear pattern of transactional interaction that profoundly disturbed August. He became genuinely fearful that leaving his total wealth to Serafina would result in its rapid and careless depletion. In sharp contrast, Finch played recordings of my conversations with August. Substantive discussions about the practicalities of sustainable building practices, sincere inquiries about his declining health, and genuine expressions of gratitude for his mentorship. August often specifically mentioned Eleanor's genuine interest in his well-being, Finch noted. She was consistently the only family member who ever inquired about his doctor's appointments or offered to assist him with daily tasks as his health deteriorated. Serafina's lead attorney was desperate, searching for any legal leverage. Even if the international transfers were technically legal, there must be evidence of emotional manipulation. There was no manipulation, Finch interrupted firmly. August independently initiated this extensive estate planning process. He consulted multiple independent attorneys, underwent psychiatric evaluation, and deliberately considered his options over several years. Finch then pulled out August's handwritten letter, his final explanation for his decisions. Finch's voice was steady as he read, "I have learned through great personal cost that blood relation does not guarantee love, respect, or responsibility. Eleanor has shown me the precise kind of person I wish to have as my legacy. She understands that wealth is a trust to be carefully stewarded, not merely a prize to be consumed." Serafina bolted upright, her chair scraping painfully against the expensive flooring. "This is insane. You are claiming that some adopted stranger receives $20 million while I am left with table scraps." "You are receiving the domestic estate," Finch corrected evenly. "After applicable taxes and administrative fees, this amounts to approximately $4.2 million. Many people would consider that a very substantial inheritance." Serafina was beyond hearing reason, her face contorted with humiliation and incandescent rage. She manipulated him. She spent years poisoning his mind against his real family. This must be fraud. Finch's expression remained professionally neutral, though I could clearly sense the distaste in his eyes. August's decision-making process is exhaustively documented. 3 independent legal firms reviewed the transfers. 2 medical professionals certified his complete mental competence. The structure, Miss Vance, is legally bulletproof. The room fell silent once more, broken only by the urgent, quiet whispering of Serafina's lawyers. They were slowly, painfully, realizing the comprehensive nature of August's planning. He had orchestrated this disclosure carefully, ensuring Serafina would learn about the massive international inheritance in the most deeply humbling manner possible. The final, calculated blow came when Finch opened his laptop, displaying a live video conference from Edinburgh. Alastair Finch Jr. appeared on the screen, situated in his office, surrounded by architectural plans and property documents. "Good morning, everyone," the younger Finch said with crisp Scottish efficiency. "I am calling to formally confirm receipt of Eleanor Vance's signed management agreements for the Edinburgh portfolio. We are fully prepared to proceed with the Venice expansion whenever she is prepared to visit the properties." Serafina stared at the screen, utterly immobilized by disbelief. Venice expansion. "The trust documents include explicit provisions for growth," Finch Sr. explained. August believed Eleanor would not only preserve his existing wealth but actively build upon it responsibly. The international portfolio is structured specifically to support continued development. I broke my silence, feeling a surge of profound sadness, not triumph. "Serafina," I said quietly, "I never desired for things to happen this way. August held out hope that you would show interest in something beyond his money. He waited for you to ask about his health, his true interests, or his life." Her voice was raw with emotion. "You planned this. You turned him against me." "I simply spent time with him," I responded softly. "I listened when he spoke about his business experiences, his travels, and his dreams for the future. You were consistently too busy, or perhaps too bored, to engage with anything that didn't involve an immediate financial transaction. Finch then presented the ultimate document, August's personal letter addressed specifically to Serafina. He wanted you to receive this only after you fully grasped the nature of the international holdings. Serafina's hands trembled as she read August's firm, loving and final words. My dear Serafina, I have ensured you are well provided for, but I could not, in good conscience, entrust my life's work to someone who views money as mere entertainment rather than an ethical responsibility. I hope that this profound disappointment will ultimately teach you what my love and patience sadly could not. That genuine relationships require far more than biological connection. They necessitate mutual respect, sincere care, and the recognition that other people are more than simply sources of personal benefit. She crumpled the letter before finishing it, tears of rage and humiliation streaming down her face. Her lead attorney made one final, desperate, half-hearted attempt. We reserve the absolute right to challenge these specific transfers through international courts. We will investigate every single aspect of this arrangement. Finch nodded politely. That is certainly your legal right. However, I must mention that contesting the international trust structure would necessitate litigation in 3 separate legal jurisdictions: Edinburgh, Venice, and Hong Kong. The projected legal fees alone would almost certainly exceed the total value of Serafina's domestic inheritance. August's final maneuver was elegant in its brutal, financial simplicity. He had ensured that any desperate attempt by Serafina to contest his meticulously laid plans would be financially devastating, while the core wealth remained securely and legally beyond the reach of domestic courts. As Serafina's exhausted legal team silently packed their documents in defeat, she turned to me, her eyes filled with wounded fury. This is not over, Eleanor. I will find a way to prove you manipulated him. I met her gaze steadily. August made his choice based entirely on our respective actions over many years. Nothing I could have said or done would have changed that outcome. If you had shown him genuine love and respect, the truth hanging in the air between us would have been profoundly different. Serafina had lost more than just a massive inheritance. She had forfeited the respect of the grandfather who had tried relentlessly to love her despite her overwhelming selfishness. I remained in Finch's office after the elevator doors closed on Serafina and her lawyers, staring out at the expansive Seattle skyline. The city suddenly looked different, vibrant and full of overwhelming possibilities. August would be immensely proud, Finch said softly. He trusted you would use this gift wisely. I nodded, feeling the immense weight of the responsibility settling onto my shoulders. The international properties were not just a gift. They were a sacred trust, a legacy that demanded careful, thoughtful stewardship and proactive growth. 6 months passed. I stood in the majestic lobby of my new Edinburgh office, located in the Meridian Tower, watching Serafina's final, desperate attempt to overturn August's planning crumble into agonizing, expensive failure. Her international legal challenge had successfully consumed every penny of her domestic inheritance, leaving her with crushing debt and no assets beyond a few personal belongings. The Scottish High Court's ruling was clear and unambiguous. The transfers were executed with complete legal compliance and documented mental competence. The plaintiff has provided absolutely no evidence of fraud, coercion, or undue influence. Serafina had been forced to sell her luxury car, her expensive jewelry, and finally, her condominium to fund the relentless litigation. Her lawyers had warned her repeatedly about the unsustainable costs, but her driving rage and ingrained sense of entitlement had forced her to pursue an utterly unwinnable case across 3 continents. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Meridian Tower's European headquarters, I could see the city sparkling. August's Edinburgh properties had effectively tripled in value since the transfer, and the Venice development was already generating highly significant rental income. My assistant knocked softly. Miss Vance, Serafina is here. She is asking to speak with you. I found my sister in the reception area. She looked haggard and utterly defeated. Her high-end designer wardrobe had been replaced by budget attire, and the confident arrogance that had defined her for so long was completely gone. Eleanor, she whispered, her voice rough from months of sustained stress and sleepless nights. "I need to talk to you." We sat in a smaller, quieter conference room overlooking the city. Serafina's hands were visibly trembling. "I have lost everything. The court cases, the accrued legal fees. I don't even have enough money left for next month's rent." I studied her face, witnessing something I had never seen before. Genuine remorse mixed with palpable, desperate fear. "What is it you want me to say, Serafina?" "I was wrong," she whispered, her voice cracking. "About you. About August. About everything." I genuinely thought family meant automatic entitlement, but I never once tried to earn his love or his respect. For a fleeting moment, I felt the familiar flicker of the old sisterly bond we had shared as children, before Serafina's suffocating sense of superiority had poisoned our relationship. "August left me a final letter too," I said, reaching for the envelope I had carried since his death. "He wrote it knowing you would inevitably challenge the inheritance. He knew you would likely lose everything in the process." Serafina's eyes widened as I read August's solemn words. "Eleanor, if you are reading this to Serafina, it signifies that she has finally learned the harsh lesson I could not teach her through love alone. She remains my granddaughter, and I hope profoundly that this terrible experience will successfully transform her understanding of what true family means." The letter continued with August's explicit instructions. A trust fund that would provide Serafina with basic, stable living expenses, contingent entirely on her demonstrably genuine change through meaningful personal growth and committed community service. "He never wanted you to be destroyed," I explained softly. "He wanted you to finally learn the vital difference between actively earning something and merely expecting it." Serafina completely broke down, months of suppressed regret and grief pouring out. I was so completely focused on the sheer amount of money that I failed to see how much he loved us both. I threw away his love, all for an inheritance I didn't remotely deserve. I reached across the table and gently took her hand. "Auguste believed people possessed the capacity to change, Serafina. He hoped this experience would teach you what his generosity never could." Through her tears, Serafina looked up. "Is there any way? Could I possibly work for you? Learn about the business? Prove that I can be more than just an entitled granddaughter?" I gazed out at the Edinburgh skyline, reflecting on August's final, heartfelt wish for familial reconciliation. "The Venice office requires an assistant property manager," I said, a measured practicality in my tone. "It's an entry-level position. Small salary but immense learning opportunities." Serafina nodded eagerly, a faint spark of true hope in her eyes. "I'll take it. Thank you, Eleanor. Thank you for giving me a genuine chance to become someone August would have finally been proud of." As we sat together in the fading afternoon light, I realized August's greatest victory was not simply in teaching Serafina a lesson about the pitfalls of entitlement. It was in successfully creating an opportunity for true family healing, a relationship rebuilt on earned respect rather than empty biological assumption. Serafina's catastrophic legal challenge had consequences that extended far beyond her financial ruin. Her public pursuit of wealth belonging to another heir irreparably damaged her social standing, as former friends and acquaintances learned about her cruelty toward her adopted sister and her entitled behavior toward August. The court's scathing decision was reported in legal journals across 3 continents, forever associating her name with family greed and frivolous litigation. Her professional prospects collapsed when potential employers discovered her history of prioritizing money over integrity. The immense stress of losing everything she had always taken for granted aged her visibly, finally forcing her to confront the stark reality that her entire identity had been falsely built on unearned privilege rather than any personal accomplishment. 2 years later, standing in my Venice office, overseeing the exponential expansion of August's carefully constructed empire, now valued at over $50 million, I reflected on the long journey. The revenge was complete, not because I had taken anything from Serafina, but because August had used his profound wisdom to structure consequences that would either destroy her or perhaps transform her into someone truly worthy of the Vance name. As I signed the complex contracts for our new Hong Kong development, I understood that the true, enduring victory was not about punishing those who had wronged me. It was about consistently proving myself worthy of the immense trust August had meticulously placed in my hands.